The neon lights of New Shanghai pierced through the heavy rain, casting prismatic reflections across the slick streets. Marcus Bennett pulled his graphene coat tighter, cursing himself for staying late at the lab again. The genetic sequences he'd been working on could have waited until morning, but perfectionism was both his greatest strength and his constant torment. Thunder rolled overhead as he cut through an alley, taking his usual shortcut home. The downpour had cleared the usually bustling streets, leaving only the occasional hover transport humming past. Something caught his eye, a flicker of movement in the shadows between two waste units. Marcus paused, squinting through the rain. A soft whimper carried on the wind, barely audible above the storm. His scientific mind said to keep walking. This wasn't exactly the safest part of the city. But something else, something deeper, made him step closer. "Hello?" he called out, voice steady despite his racing heart. "Is someone there?" The shadow shifted again, and Marcus caught a glimpse of iridescent fur. His breath caught in his throat. There, huddled against the wall, was a being unlike any he'd seen before. Feline features blended seamlessly with almost human characteristics, deep violet eyes, delicate hands with retractable claws, and fur that seemed to shimmer with bioluminescence. She was injured, one arm clutched protectively against her side. When their eyes met, he saw equal parts fear and defiance in her gaze. "Stay back," she warned, her voice carrying a melodic quality despite its harshness. "I don't need human help." Marcus remained still, raising his hands slowly. "You're bleeding," he observed, his medical training kicking in. "And your bioluminescence is fading, sign of severe stress in Feladian physiology, if I'm not mistaken." Surprise flickered across her features. "You know of my kind?" "I'm a bioengineer at the Interspecies Medical Institute," he explained. "I've studied xenobiology, though I've never met a Feladian in person. I'm Marcus." She studied him for a long moment, her tail twitching with indecision. Finally, she spoke, "Farah." "Farah," he repeated softly. "Will you let me help you? My apartment isn't far, and I have medical supplies." Another crack of thunder made her flinch. She glanced at the street beyond the alley, then back at Marcus. "Why would you help me?" The question caught him off guard. In his work, helping others was simply what one did. Species, origin, circumstances, none of that mattered when someone was in pain. "Because you're hurt," he said simply. "Because I can." Farah's ears flattened against her head as she considered his words. Finally, she nodded, attempting to stand. Her legs buckled immediately, and Marcus rushed forward to catch her before she fell. "Sorry," she muttered, leaning against him more heavily than she probably wanted to. "Lost more blood than I thought." "It's okay," he assured her, supporting her weight carefully. "Just take it slow." They made their way through the rain-slicked streets, Marcus adjusting his pace to match her labored steps. His apartment was in one of the older buildings that had survived the Great Reconstruction, actual brick and mortar rather than the sleek neocarbon structures that dominated most of the city. Once inside, Marcus helped Farah to his couch, quickly gathering his medical supplies. As he treated her wounds, laser burns, he realized with growing concern, she gradually told him her story. She'd been a research subject at GeneCorp, initially there voluntarily to help study her species' unique healing abilities. But when she discovered they were using the research to develop biological weapons, she tried to leave. They had other plans. "They said I knew too much," she explained, wincing as Marcus applied a regenerative gel to her wounds. "Wanted to keep me in stasis for further study. I refused." Marcus's hands stilled for a moment. He'd heard rumors about GeneCorp's less ethical practices, but this was beyond anything he'd imagined. "You're safe here," he promised, though he knew it wasn't that simple. A corporation like GeneCorp had eyes everywhere. As he finished treating her injuries, Farah caught his wrist gently, her violet eyes meeting his. "Thank you," she said softly. I didn't expect to find kindness here. Humanity isn't all bad, Marcus replied with a small smile. We're just complicated. Complicated, she repeated, her own lips curving slightly. That's one way to put it. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but within the apartment, something new was beginning, a connection that would soon reshape both their worlds in ways neither could imagine. That night, as Thera slept on his couch and Marcus lay awake in his bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had irreversibly changed. He'd always believed in using science to bridge the gaps between species, to heal and help. But now, facing the reality of corruption and cruelty hiding behind corporate progress, he realized that sometimes bridges had to be built in more personal ways. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. GeneCorp wouldn't stop looking for her, and harboring a fugitive, even one who'd been wrongfully imprisoned, would put everything he'd worked for at risk. But as he listened to the soft sound of her breathing in the next room, Marcus knew he'd made the right choice. Sometimes, he realized, the most important scientific discoveries weren't made in labs or under microscopes. Sometimes they happened in rain-soaked alleys, in moments of simple human compassion. Marcus woke to the smell of something burning. He bolted upright, his mind immediately racing to worst-case scenarios. Had GeneCorp found them? But when he rushed into the kitchen, he found a very different scene, Thera standing bewildered in front of his cooking unit, trying to make sense of the smoking remnants of what might have been breakfast. I wanted to thank you, she said, her ears drooping slightly in embarrassment. But your food preparation devices are different from what I'm used to. Marcus couldn't help but laugh, the tension draining from his shoulders as he helped her clean up. It's the thought that counts, he assured her, showing her how to properly use the appliances. As they worked together to make a new breakfast, he noticed how quickly she picked up the techniques, her natural grace making even simple movements seem fluid and purposeful. You're healing remarkably fast, he observed, noting how she moved with almost no sign of last night's injuries. Is that normal for your species? Thera's tail twitched, a gesture he was beginning to recognize as discomfort. That's what made us valuable to GeneCorp, she said quietly. Our cellular regeneration rate is 5 times that of humans. But it's more than that. We can adapt. Evolve in real time to survive environmental changes. Marcus's scientific mind raced with the implications. That's incredible, he breathed. The applications for medicine alone are exactly why they won't let me go, Thera interrupted, her violet eyes intense. They don't want to help people, Marcus. They want to weaponize it. Imagine soldiers who could adapt to any environment, any weapon. Imagine viruses that could evolve faster than any cure. The food lay forgotten as Marcus processed her words. He'd dedicated his life to healing, to bringing species together. The idea of such potential being twisted into weapons made him sick. We need proof, he said finally. Something concrete we can take to the Interstellar Ethics Committee. Thera's expression darkened. I tried that. The committee members are all in GeneCorp's pocket. Why do you think I was running? Before Marcus could respond, his comm unit buzzed. His stomach dropped when he saw the caller ID, Dr. Raina Walsh, his supervisor at the institute. I have to take this, he said apologetically. Just stay quiet. Thera nodded, melting into the shadows of the apartment with predatory grace as Marcus answered the call. Dr. Walsh's hologram flickered to life in his living room. Marcus, where are you? You're never late. Her tone was concerned, but something in her eyes made Marcus uneasy. Sorry, Dr. Walsh. I'm not feeling well. Thought I'd take a personal day. She studied him through the hologram. This wouldn't have anything to do with the break-in at GeneCorp last night, would it? They're saying someone stole sensitive research materials. Marcus kept his expression neutral, even as his heart raced. I don't follow corporate news much, he lied. Too depressing. Dr. Walsh's hologram flickered. Well, feel better. Oh, and Marcus? Be careful who you trust. Some things are bigger than individual ethics. The hologram vanished, leaving Marcus cold despite the morning sun streaming through his windows. When Thera emerged from the shadows, her expression was grim. They're closing in, she said softly. You should turn me in. Save yourself. Marcus shook his head, a plan already forming. No. But we need to move. The Institute has access to GeneCorp's private research network. If we can get in there, find proof of what they're really doing. It's too dangerous, Thera protested, but Marcus could see the hope kindling in her eyes. Probably, he agreed, already gathering supplies. But you're not the only one who believes in doing what's right. They spent the rest of the morning preparing. Marcus called in sick for the rest of the week, citing a viral infection, buying them time. He showed Thera how to use his security systems and gave her access to his emergency accounts. If anything happened to him, she'd need resources to survive. As they worked, Marcus found himself increasingly aware of her presence, the graceful way she moved, how her fur caught the light, the intelligence burning in her violet eyes. She was unlike anyone he'd ever met, human or alien, and he was beginning to realize his desire to help her went beyond simple ethics. Why are you really doing this? She asked suddenly, catching him watching her. The truth. Marcus considered deflecting but decided she deserved honesty. Because what they're doing is wrong. Because you deserve better. And because. He hesitated, then pushed forward. Because from the moment I found you in that alley, I knew you were going to change my life. Thera's bioluminescence flickered, a cascade of subtle colors that Marcus suspected meant more than his xenobiology training had covered. She stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. You've already changed mine, she whispered. The moment was interrupted by an alert from Marcus's security system. Someone was in the building, heading for his floor. Someone using an Institute override code. They looked at each other, understanding passing between them without words. Whatever came next, they were in it together. As they quickly gathered their essentials and headed for the emergency exit, Marcus realized that sometimes the biggest discoveries weren't made in labs or recorded in journals. Sometimes they were made in moments like these, when you chose to stand beside someone and face the unknown, not because it was safe or logical, but because it was right. The underground transit tunnels beneath New Shanghai were a maze of abandoned maintenance corridors and forgotten pathways. Marcus and Thera moved swiftly through the darkness, their footsteps echoing off ancient concrete walls. His hand gripped hers tightly, guiding her through passages he'd discovered during his early days at the Institute, when he'd spent hours exploring the city's forgotten spaces. How much further? Thera whispered, her violet eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Her bioluminescence had dimmed to almost nothing, a survival adaptation that made Marcus both impressed and concerned. Almost there, he assured her. The Institute's secondary lab complex connects to these tunnels. It's where they keep the more sensitive research. He didn't mention that breaking in was probably going to end his career, if not his freedom. They emerged into a small maintenance room filled with outdated cleaning drones. Marcus approached a seemingly ordinary wall panel and pressed his palm against it. A hidden scanner hummed to life. "Welcome, Dr. Bennett," a synthetic voice chimed. Access granted. The wall slid open, revealing a sterile white corridor. Marcus turned to Thera. "Ready?" She squared her shoulders, her tail swishing with determination. "Lead the way." They moved quickly through the facility, Marcus's credentials getting them through most security checkpoints. The late hour meant minimal staff, but they still had to duck into doorways several times to avoid passing researchers. Finally, they reached the central data core, a massive quantum computer that housed the Institute's most classified files. Marcus plugged in his access chip, fingers flying over the holographic interface. This doesn't make sense, he muttered after several minutes of searching. These research logs, they're not just about biological weapons. They're trying to create some kind of hive mind technology, using your species' adaptive abilities as a base. Thera leaned closer, her breath catching. The collective, she whispered. That's what they called it in the lab. They said it was the next step in evolution, forced synchronization of consciousness across multiple beings. But that's... Marcus trailed off, horror dawning as he understood. They're trying to create a slave race. Beings that can survive anywhere, adapt to anything, all controlled by a single consciousness. My people would never agree to this, Thera said, her voice shaking with rage. They wouldn't have to. Marcus pulled up another file. Look, they're developing a virus that targets your species' unique neural pathways. Once infected, you'd have no choice. A slow clap echoed through the room. Marcus and Thera spun around to find Dr. Walsh standing in the doorway, flanked by Gene Corp security officers. Brilliant deduction, Marcus, she said, smiling coldly. Though I expected you to figure it out sooner. You always were my most promising student. Marcus stepped in front of Thera protectively. How long have you known that you were harboring our escape test subject? Since she first entered your apartment. We've been watching you for years, Marcus. Waiting to see if you had what it takes to join the next phase of human evolution. Evolution? Marcus spat the word. You're talking about slavery. Genocide. Dr. Walsh sighed. Always so dramatic. We're talking about survival. Humanity's survival. The galaxy is vast and hostile, Marcus. We need every advantage we can get. By becoming the very monsters we fear? Marcus felt Thera's hand slip into his, squeezing gently. In that touch, he felt her trust, her strength, and suddenly he knew what they had to do. Now, he whispered, and they moved as one. While Thera launched herself at the security officers with preternatural speed, Marcus slammed his hand down on the emergency protocols panel. Alarms blared as quarantine barriers slammed down, separating them from Dr. Walsh. They ran, bullets ricocheting off walls behind them. Marcus's heart pounded as they wove through the complex, security hot on their heels. They just needed to reach the surface. He had a plan, or at least, the desperate beginning of one. Marcus. Thera's warning came just as searing pain erupted in his shoulder. He stumbled, but she caught him, practically carrying him as they burst through an emergency exit into the rain-soaked night. They didn't stop running until they reached the neon-lit chaos of the night market district. There, among the crowded stalls and mixed-species crowd, they finally paused to catch their breath. You're hurt, Thera said, examining his wound with gentle hands. I'll live. Marcus managed a weak smile. Though I might need to borrow some of that remarkable healing ability of yours. Her violet eyes softened as she pressed her hand against his injury. To his amazement, a warm tingling spread through his shoulder, the pain gradually fading. How? We can share our abilities, in small ways, with those we trust completely. Her voice was soft, intimate despite the bustling crowd around them. Marcus stared at her, understanding dawning. What they'd discovered in the lab wasn't just about weapons or control, it was about connection. The very thing Gene Corp was trying to corrupt was what made her people truly extraordinary. We have to stop them, he said quietly. Not just for your people, but for everyone. What they're planning, it would change everything. Thera nodded, her determination matching his own. We will. But first, we need allies. Her ears twitched thoughtfully. I know someone who's been fighting Gene Corp from the shadows for years. But reaching her won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is, Marcus replied, taking her hand again. Around them, the neon lights of New Shanghai painted the rain in countless colors, a reminder of the beautiful complexity they were fighting to protect. As they disappeared into the crowd, Marcus realized that sometimes the most important battles weren't fought with weapons or technology, but with trust, connection, and the courage to stand together against the darkness. The safe house was hidden in plain sight, a small noodle shop in the heart of New Shanghai's alien quarter. Steam rose from massive pots, carrying the scent of dishes from a dozen worlds. Marcus followed Thera through the crowded dining room, trying to ignore the throbbing in his shoulder. Her healing touch had stopped the bleeding, but the wound was far from fully healed. "Are you sure about this contact of yours?" he whispered as they approached a back door marked with subtle glyphs he didn't recognize. Thera's tail twitched nervously. "Raven is complicated. But she's been fighting corporate corruption longer than either of us has been alive." The door opened before they could knock, revealing a tall, striking figure. For a moment, Marcus thought she was human, until he noticed the iridescent scales scattered across her skin like stars. A Serpentian, one of the oldest spacefaring races. "Little sister," Raven said, her voice carrying the distinctive musical undertones of her species. "I wondered when you'd finally find your way here." Thera bowed slightly. "Elder Raven. We need your help." The Serpentian's silver eyes flickered to Marcus, then to his wounded shoulder. "So I see. Come, quickly. Your pursuit grows closer." They followed her through a maze of corridors that seemed impossibly large for the small shop above. The walls were lined with screens showing security feeds from across the city. Marcus spotted several GeneCorp security teams moving through the streets. "They're using predictive AI to track your movements," Raven explained, leading them into a room filled with holographic displays. "Fortunately, I have better algorithms." "You knew about GeneCorp's plans?" Marcus asked, unable to keep the accusation from his voice. "About the virus?" Raven's expression darkened. "I've been gathering evidence for years. But corporations like GeneCorp have buried themselves too deeply in Earth's power structures. We needed something more, something that would shock even their most ardent supporters into action. Like proof they're planning to enslave an entire species?" Thera suggested grimly. "Precisely." Raven activated a holographic display, showing a complex network of connections. "But it's bigger than just your people, little sister. GeneCorp is working with similar corporations on a dozen worlds. They're planning to reshape the galaxy in their image, a perfectly controlled hierarchy of adapted species, each engineered to serve those above them." Marcus felt sick. "How do we stop them? We already have everything we need." Raven smiled, the expression making her look suddenly dangerous. "The data you stole from the Institute? It contained more than just research logs. It has financial records, communications, prototype formulas, everything we need to expose them. I've been distributing it across secure channels for the past hour." "Then why aren't we seeing any reaction?" Thera demanded. "Because," a new voice said from the doorway, "we've been waiting for the right moment." They turned to find a human woman in a pristine business suit standing there. Marcus recognized her immediately, Victoria Chen, head of the Interstellar Ethics Committee. "Madam Chancellor," Raven inclined her head. "Right on schedule. You're working together?" Marcus asked, bewildered. "Not all humans are blind to corporate corruption, Dr. Bennett," Victoria said, stepping into the room. "Some of us have been playing a very long game." She turned to Thera. "Your escape was no accident. We needed someone brave enough to run, someone who would find the right allies. Someone who could show humanity that there are things more important than profit." "You used me?" Thera's fur bristled. "We gave you an opportunity," Raven corrected gently. "You chose what to do with it. You chose him." Marcus felt Thera's hand find his, her touch calming despite his racing thoughts. "So what happens now?" Victoria's smile was sharp. Now we spring the trap. In exactly 3 minutes, every major news network in the galaxy will receive proof of GeneCorp's activities. Simultaneously, ethics committees on 17 worlds will launch investigations. Their stock is already beginning to fall. As if on cue, the screens around them lit up with breaking news alerts. Marcus watched in amazement as the story spread like wildfire across networks and planets. "They won't go down without a fight," Thera warned. "We're counting on it," Raven said. "Their desperation will only prove their guilt." A distant explosion rocked the building. Alarms blared across Raven's security feeds. "Speaking of desperation," Victoria said calmly, "it seems Dr. Walsh isn't taking the news well." Marcus moved closer to Thera as Raven's screens showed GeneCorp forces converging on their location. "They're going to try to silence us all." "Let them try," Thera said, her violet eyes glowing with determination. Her hand squeezed his. "We fight together now." Marcus looked around the room, at Raven's ancient wisdom, Victoria's calculated courage, and Thera's fierce spirit. He thought about everything he'd learned since that rainy night in the alley, about connection and trust and the true meaning of evolution. Together, he agreed, as the sound of approaching forces echoed through the corridors. Around them, screens continued to light up with the truth they'd helped expose, spreading faster than any corporate algorithm could contain. The real battle was just beginning, but for the first time, Marcus felt truly ready. Because sometimes the greatest strength wasn't in standing alone, but in choosing to stand together, human and alien, past and future, heart and mind united against the darkness that threatened them all. The battle for Raven's sanctuary unfolded like a storm. GeneCorp forces breached the outer defenses with military precision, but they weren't prepared for what awaited them. Raven's security systems were unlike anything Marcus had ever seen, a blend of technology from a dozen worlds, each layer more sophisticated than the last. "Fall back to the central chamber," Raven commanded, her scales shimmering as she coordinated their defense. "Victoria's reinforcements are 3 minutes out." Marcus and Thera moved together through the corridors, covering each other with an instinctive synchronization that felt almost supernatural. Her feline grace complemented his tactical thinking, while his scientific knowledge enhanced her natural abilities. They weren't just fighting alongside each other, they were fighting as one. "Behind you." Thera's warning came just as a GeneCorp squad rounded the corner. Marcus dropped and rolled, giving her the opening she needed to leap over him, her claws extended. The soldiers didn't stand a chance against her enhanced speed and strength. "The virus," Marcus called out as they continued running. "They'll try to deploy it." As if confirming his fears, alarms blared throughout the complex. "Biological agent detected," Raven's security system announced. Quarantine protocols engaged. They reached the central chamber just as Dr. Walsh stepped through the opposite entrance, holding a sleek silver device. Her usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, her eyes wild with a fanatic's gleam. "You don't understand what you've done," she snarled. "The galaxy is evolving, with or without your permission. We're just trying to ensure humanity stays on top." "By becoming monsters?" Marcus positioned himself between Walsh and Thera. "That's not evolution, it's extinction. You'd destroy everything that makes us human. Humanity is weakness." Walsh raised the device. "Your compassion, your individuality, they're evolutionary dead ends. The collective is the future. And if you won't embrace it willingly." She pressed a button, and a fine mist began spraying from vents throughout the room. Thera gasped, her fur standing on end as the virus began to take effect. "No!" Marcus lunged forward, but Walsh's security team held him back. He watched in horror as Thera fell to her knees, her violet eyes clouding over. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of submitting to the virus's control, Thera began to glow. Her bioluminescence pulsed with increasing intensity, patterns of light racing across her fur in complex, beautiful sequences. "Impossible," Walsh whispered. Not impossible, Raven's voice came from the shadows. Inevitable. You forgot the most basic principle of evolution, Doctor. Adaptation goes both ways. Marcus understood suddenly. The healing she shared with me, it wasn't just healing, was it? Thera rose slowly, her eyes now blazing with inner light. My people don't just adapt to survive, she said, her voice carrying a new resonance. We adapt to connect. To understand. Every time we share our gift, we grow stronger, not as individuals, but as a community of free beings. The light emanating from her began to spread, touching everyone in the room. Marcus felt it wash over him like a warm wave, carrying with it understanding beyond words. He saw through Thera's eyes, felt through her heart, and knew she was experiencing the same from him. This is real connection, he said, looking at Walsh. Not forced, not controlled, but freely given and received. This is true evolution. The chamber doors burst open as Victoria's forces arrived, led by representatives from a dozen alien species. But the fight was already over. Walsh's soldiers lowered their weapons, many of them weeping as Thera's light showed them the truth they'd been blind to. It's not too late, Thera said softly, approaching Walsh. You can still choose a different path. The scientist stared at her former test subject, seeing for the first time the being she truly was. The silver device clattered to the floor. In the days that followed, the full scope of Gene Corp's conspiracy was revealed to the galaxy. Corporations fell, governments were reformed, and new alliances were forged between species. But more importantly, a new understanding began to spread, not through force or control, but through choice and connection. Marcus and Thera remained at the heart of it all, working with Raven and Victoria to build bridges between worlds. The Institute was transformed, becoming a true center for interspecies cooperation and research. Their story became a symbol of hope, a reminder that the greatest evolutionary leaps come not from domination, but from understanding. Do you ever regret it? Thera asked him one evening, as they stood on the roof of the Institute, watching the sun set over New Shanghai. Getting involved that night in the rain? Marcus took her hand, feeling the familiar warmth of their connection flow between them. In her violet eyes, he saw not just his future, but the future of all species who dared to reach across the void and find understanding in their differences. Never, he said softly. Some choices reshape more than just our lives, they reshape the very path of evolution itself. Around them, the city glowed with countless lights, each one representing a story, a connection, a possibility. Above, the stars beckoned, no longer a reminder of vast, cold distances, but of bridges yet to be built and understandings yet to be reached. And in that moment, as human and alien stood together beneath an Earth sky, both knew that this wasn't just an ending, it was a beginning. For in the grand dance of evolution, every end is just a new adaptation waiting to be discovered, every barrier a new bridge waiting to be built, and every difference a new strength waiting to be shared.